Things are moving along on the legalization of recreational pot in Canada. Provinces have announced deals on how cannabis will be sold once it does become legal later this year. Today, Manitoba said it has selected a mix of organizations to handle the retailing of weed. These include licensed producers and medical clinic operator National Access Cannabis. But you likely won't be able to buy recreational weed legally until at least August, instead of the original July 1st deadline. That's because a final vote on the federal law will not come until June 7th, and provinces and territories need time to prepare following royal assent. Chuck Raffici is the chairman of National Access Cannabis. He's also the CEO of marijuana streaming company Cannabis Wheaton. Nice to see you. You guys are one of these four that are going to be doing the retailing of marijuana in Manitoba. And it's an interesting model. It's kind of a hybrid between the free-for-all in Alberta and the government-regulated model in Ontario. Tell us a bit about how this is going to work in Manitoba.
Absolutely. I mean, every province is going to have a provincial distributor that's really going to control and buy wholesale from existing licensed producers. But with this, these finalists or kind of pending licensees in Manitoba, we have really the first kind of group or cohort of private enterprise that are going to have federally legal dispensary licenses. So it's very exciting and a big milestone.
But is the onus then, like in Ontario, the Ontario Cannabis Board of Ontario, whatever it's called, is going to be responsible for commissioning and buying and making sure it's sourced all the right material. Is now the onus on you to make sure you've got distribution deals with everybody to get the right product, the right places at the right times?
Well, exactly. So in Ontario, in a form of double dipping, they're taking a distribution margin as well as a retail margin and HST, which is another issue. So they're going to do quite well. But at the same time, Ontario is really the last place that as a producer that you want to put your product into. There's going to be higher margin jurisdictions like Manitoba. So with various distribution deals, now these retailers are going to be looking to lock down supply as National Access Cannabis has and others.
I mean, you come on the show regularly to talk about this space. You were one of the earliest investors that I know that was involved in it. How important, what's your view of where we are in terms of the capacity crunch that's going to come, whether it's June, July, or August, but it's coming fast now. Are we in this country ready? Are we going to be producing the amount of marijuana that people like you now are going to be selling?
I think we're always going to be a little bit of a crunch. The industry is building a lot of capacity. There's obviously a lot of execution risk on building out that capacity, and at the same time, Health Canada, as the regulator, is going to unlock shelf space as they allow new product types. So if we had brownies and edibles and other things day one, that would be a much larger crunch. Right. And so that kind of eases the pain of the progression. And then at the same time, places like Ontario with a limited amount of stores are also going to ease that crunch. But then we see, Alberta, which seems to be, completely free market, is going to kind of create additional demand. Right. And so I think you'll always be a little bit behind the 8 ball because this is a crop, and it does take about a year to build a facility, another year or two to really get up to scale. So all that capacity has been announced. It's still going to take a few years to fully come online.
And then when you look at those patchwork regulations that Ontario is different from Alberta, which is different from New Brunswick, like it's all over the place. Does it make it harder for a national organization to try to figure out how to build up, how to source up, and how to actually distribute in this country?
Yes, well, it's like alcohol, and we expect it to be fairly different by each province. But at the end of the day, I view the world as you have your upstream production, essentially building supply. You have kind of midstream value add, creating products, licensing deals to be able to take that kind of gram price and build into a product with a much higher gram equivalent price point, and then distribution and retail. And the way I view retail, it's really kind of the next wave. In Colorado and other kind of mature retail markets, far more value on the retail and product side than on the cultivation side. So I think all the value has been created to date on growing cannabis. I think we're going to see a lot more value created on the product and retailing front.
The interesting thing in Colorado is from banking to production to distribution, it has really favored locals. And I would have thought that would have played itself out in Canada that way with the patchwork of regulations. And yet it's largely big national companies like yourselves that are taking the initiative here. Is there a benefit to being a local in some of these regulatory environments?
Well, I think in Manitoba, case in point, we were very fortunate at National Access Cannabis when we went public. The Opaskwayak Cree Nation of Manitoba sought us out and really wanted to make a very significant investment. They became the largest individual shareholder of National Access Cannabis, and Chief Sinclair of that nation sits on our board. I think the first chief to sit on a public company board in the TSX. And so it truly is a First Nation, partly owned business. Right. And so that's been, I think, a very critical component because it is very much a political issue as much of as a business opportunity. And so just like we saw with gaming, there's certain advantages that First Nations have, particularly with municipal zoning. When you're on individual nation territory, you kind of bypass that one level of government, so it's a big advantage.
Really quickly, because we're out of time. Is the delay a big deal, or is this couple weeks and not that big of a deal, guys like you?
I think it's going to be a big deal for the stock market prices. Retail investors are going to see that and kind of take some air out of the stream. But 1, 2, 3, 5 months, I think it's going to be kind of September. Right. It's kind of really irrelevant. Everybody's still going to keep building capacity. The industry's not going to say, oh, let's take the gas off. Yeah.
All right, Chuck, great to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks a lot.
Chuck Rafici, Chairman of National Access Cannabis and CEO of Cannabis Wheaton.